Hey everybody, welcome back to part 2 of the Stage 3 fan kit install. In today's video, we're going to go over the installation of the wiring. We're going to show you how to install it with a standalone ECU or with the supplied controller kit. Alright, I started this process at the top and to route the wires. And these harnesses have really big plugs on them, and there's just so much stuff in this car that I couldn't feed these large plugs down through it all. So I'm actually going to route the wires up from the bottom. So to make things a little easier, I taped my ends and taped my two harnesses together. That way they don't fray apart as I push them up through the bottom. And then we just want to pick a path that is free of anything rotating like belts and free of chafe. So, and that line up with our sensors. So we will probably go through this hole here. All right, now that I've got them most of the way up to where I know I can grab them from the top, I'll go ahead and plug them in. Now they are universal, but we will need to figure out which one is which from the top side. So we'll do that. We'll be able to determine that based on the length, because they're both the same length to start with, but one has more slack than the other. But I will secure them up down here just so I'm not pulling anything tight with zip ties. And then once I'm up top, I can pull them snug and then just relieve them a little bit so nothing's under tension. So we'll do that now. We can come back through on the bottom when we button everything up to trim these cable tie ends. So now we'll lower the car and pull up the wiring from the top. This is where we're going to mount our circuit breakers. So to route them cleanly, I'll go underneath the radiator hose and route them up this direction. As you can see, one is longer than the other, so we know this is our passenger side, this is our driver's side. Probably actually route these as clean as possible, so I'll go underneath things where appropriate. Now we'll mount our circuit breakers. Here's our 30 amp circuit breaker, as well as the little protective cover, since this will be hot at all times. You notice the studs are different colors. We have a zinc coated and a copper. The copper is the battery hookup, or in this case, we're going to hook up to the alternator, and the zinc will connect to each fan. So we have two circuit breakers, one for each fan, and the protective cover to keep things free of danger. We'll be installing these with the supplied M5 bolt, 2 washers and a nut. They take an 8mm socket or wrench to attach. And on an NA, we have this handy little bracket tab here. We'll go ahead and use that to attach these guys. So I'm actually going to make this a little easier and push the bolt up from the bottom. Getting to the back side's a little tricky. So if you have someone with small fingers, they might be able to help you out. And we might as well also take that off. Give myself a little more hand space. There we go. So now we'll square them out. After tightening, you can still kind of force them into a clocked position, like so. Protective covers will sit like this. The wires will be able to come out the sides, so we'll deal with those later. All right, I'm now getting ready to hook up wiring. Each harness comes with the 4 wires. We have the red, which we already discussed, will hook up to the circuit breaker. The yellow does not get used, so I'll cut it off within the loom. The black is the ground for the fan, and the white is the signal to the fan. So I'll route this into the cab where the ECU is, join the 2 whites together, and hook them up to the Hydra so it can control the fan's function. They do give you plenty of extra wire, so I'm going to go ahead and get some of the loom cut back and some of the lengths cut down to make this a nice clean routing. Might actually change the routing here a little bit because I think it'll make it just a little bit cleaner. Go up above the solenoid. To do that, I'll also cut my wire lengths apart. Route that over there, keep it out of the way. These are the crimp style eyelet terminals. So you crimp them over the wire. They're also heat shrinkable to make a weather tight connection and also provides a little strain relief. This may not be necessary, but it's just never a bad idea to tape off cut wires. Okay, so that'll go up and over to continue on to the Hydra. All right, there's a number of ground points to choose from. I'm gonna go ahead and use the guy right here. It's fairly easy to access and it doesn't cause the ground wire to chafe on any sharp edges. I just have to loop it back on itself. You do not have to use this ground point. There's dozens of other options because you have plenty of wire. So just pick whatever works best for you. I'm going to wait to hook it up because I'll have another ground point going to the same location from the other fan. And I don't want to have to do the same job twice. So it will float for now. All right, I think we're ready to do our other fan. So we've already cut the loom back. Now that I know exactly where I want things to route, I'm going to go ahead and start zip tying some things into place. The white wires together, we took care of the yellow, the red, All right, now that both grounds are done, we'll go ahead and get them routed into place. Probably did things a little out of order because I'm cleaning up my wires, kind of covered my bolt, but I can work around that. Just to help improve the look of the install, I'm routing these wires toward the firewall. I have a little bit of extra loom, so to kind of keep those from being obvious, go ahead and route them through the extra loom we have. So we'll get back to the white wires in here in a bit. Let's finish up the power supply, and then we need to get power supply from the alternator. So we'll have a wire off the alternator up to these two posts. These covers have to go on before we fully tighten everything down, so we actually have to pull these back up temporarily. Now we're on to the alternator. Included is your kit is a length of red wire, so we'll use that to attach from the alternator to these other two posts. I'm actually going to do a little trick since I don't want to run two wires and I don't really have anything to branch them off. I'm going to run just a little strand of wire from one circuit breaker to the other, and then one wire from the one circuit breaker to the alternator. So this one side's done, we can go ahead and fit the cover. The way these stay down is the little top nub presses down over the stud and there's an interference fit. So that's what will hold it down. And it kind of just flexes to deal with the wires that are passing through it. Alright, now we need to get to the alternator. Okay, so from here you can see, just barely see, the stud and the nut of the main alternator post in the picture just above the red wire. The red wire is the one I just routed from the top. So from down here, I will mark my length. I will then pull the wire back up, cut it, crimp on my eyelet, drop the wire back down, and from down here where I have access to this nut, I can remove it, add my eyelet, and put the nut back on, tighten things up. And I just need to make sure this wire is free from chafe, especially on that oil cooler line that we have here. So you may not have near as many difficulties because you may not have all these extra aftermarket parts on your car. Now, of all the eyelets that you were provided, a couple of them have a larger diameter hole. One of these is meant for the alternator post, since it's an M8 as opposed to everything else, which is either an M5 or an M6. All right, now we will route it back down to where we can access it and hook it up. All right, car's back up. Now I'm going to put that eyelet on the alternator post as I previously have shown you. Into the abyss. Remember, the battery should be disconnected. Double check that there's no chafing, because this is a always hot wire. So if it chafes through, it'll do bad things to your electrical system. All right, looks like we're all clear. All right, we've worked our way inside the car. I've passed those 2 white wires through the firewall grommet, ran it down the kick panel, and I've routed it underneath the carpet. So I have the 2 wires here. I cut their lengths to be the same, stripped them back, because I'm gonna use the supplied 3-way butt connector. Using the blue end, I'll twist these guys together. Blue end goes on that side. Then using the supplied white wire, I've stripped back one end. That will go into the red. Okay. Give those a tug test, make sure they don't pull out. I'll come back and heat shrink this later, but that does need to get done. I'll route the wire the rest of the way. Now we have our other end here. It's going to reach to the PCM and plug into the Hydra in this case. So I'll go ahead and strip back an end and use the supplied Hydra terminal pin. And I'm going to go get the ECU specific crimpers. If you use generic crimpers, usually you'll end up with a failed crimp. So let's get the right thing. There's the bare wire, and then we'll crimp around the insulation as well. I'll do it over here. Okay, just like that. Find my vacant spot and slip it past the other wires that are already there. Put it in until it clicks, give it a little tug, make sure it doesn't pull back out. And then we'll retain it with the clip I removed. We'll go ahead and plug everything back in, get it all buttoned up back here. We'll top off the cooling system to where we can run the car. We'll run the car and test the fans, make sure everything's working as it should. So we'll do that now. All right, now that I've shown you how to do this installation with a standalone ECU, I'm going to show you how to do it with a stock ECU. If you have a stock ECU, you're going to be supplied with a controller kit. It includes the sensor, as well as the harness that is required to wire it in. This sensor has a 3/8 MPT thread, so we're going to use a little Teflon paste and we're going to put this somewhere on the hot side. If you're using a later model crossflow radiator, there is a 3/8 MPT port directly below the upper radiator hose on the end tank of the radiator. This car doesn't have that, and if you do not have that, we do have a hose splice that has a 3/8 MPT port. So we have it located in a splice on this part on the upper radiator hose. All right, now we're moving on to actually wiring this kit in. This is the harness that's included with the kit. This end plugs into the sensor. On the other end, we have the 4 wires. We'll start with the red wire. That's going to be our switched power. In this case, I have it wired into the charcoal canister solenoid. On that solenoid, there is a white and red wire, which in most cases on a Miata is switched power, but you'll want to confirm that with a multimeter before you proceed. Our next wire is the black one. That's going to ground, just an eyelet terminal. Our next wire is our white wire. That's going to be joined to the 2 white wires that are coming out of the fan harnesses themselves. Lastly is our blue wire, which has one of 2 purposes. If you have air conditioning, you're going to wire this into the switched power output of the AC relay. That's going to command your fans to turn on when your AC is activated. Now granted, this will cause your fans to run full speed when your air conditioning is on. If you do not like that, you could go out and source a potentiometer, which will allow you to dial back the voltage received, thus slowing down your fans. You just want to make sure there's sufficient flow for proper AC function. If you don't have air conditioning, you can wire this to a manual switch, which allows you to activate the fans at your discretion. Again, if you hook it up to a switched power source, it will run the fans full speed. So again, if you want to slow them down, you may want to add a potentiometer. All right, now we're going to fill the cooling system back up so we can test the fans. All right, we're all buttoned up. We're here at the computer, which is linked into the Hydra. Then what we're gonna do is test our fans. So I'm gonna go ahead and command the fans to come on so we can show you what it's like. So I'll set them to a fairly low speed. It does take them a second to turn on. So we'll walk over there. You can hear they just kicked on. Not too loud. Still moving a ton of air for not spinning that fast. And then we'll come back over and show you full speed. So they do get a bit loud at full tilt, but rarely ever is it going to need to get this fast. They're very efficient fans, move a lot of air, so this is kind of worst case scenario. So yeah, this is the fan kit. If you have a fan not operating, check to make sure the fan blade is not bound on the shroud. This has been part 2 of the installation of the Stage 3 fan kit, where we've gone over wiring and controller installation. If you missed out on part 1, we installed the fans and the shroud. We do thank you for watching this video series. If you have any questions about installing the kit or the kit itself, please give us a call or send us an email. We are going to be doing more videos like this in the future, so stay tuned and we'll see you next time.